So this is about backyard beekeeping, rural. And if you want to know if where you live, by the way, is a great place to keep bees, here's a website for you. It's called beescape.org. And when you go there and look at that, you'll find out, first of all, what kind of pesticides are being used where you keep your bees, what kind of natural resources are established and available to bees, should they be feral or should you lose swarms and things like that. So I happen to live in a really good area for that, and you can find out it's a national register. So what I'm supposed to talk about today is new things that are coming up for beekeepers, and again, kind of specifically backyard beekeepers, and also what I do for winter preparation. So I'm going to start off with the winter preps because I also have a video to show you that will take up some time. So this is a very basic setup. This happens to be an 8-frame setup today that I'm talking about, but what I prefer to use are 10-frame hives in Wattsburg. We're kind of at 1,300 feet above sea level, periods at 500, so our climate's very different. We're in the snow belt for sure, right? So one of the things that I have out where I live are skunks, possums, raccoons. Skunks are my #1 predators of bees at night, which can also cause your bees to get defensive, and that's why your super friendly colony all of a sudden flies out and stings you just because you went out there with your cup of coffee. You have to know what's going on at night, but what I found out is, starting off at the bottom board of your hive, 18 inches is out of reach of skunks. So 18 inches off the ground, you're safe. So that, and we monitor that with cameras at night, motion detector cameras, so we get to see what they're doing. So some people believe that if a skunk comes up to a beehive, if it has to raise its front feet, it won't expose its belly, because then it would be sensitive to stings and could be deterred from raiding a beehive. That's demonstrated to be not true. They'll stand on their tippy toes and they'll reach up and they'll scratch to the landing board. The bees fly out at night, the bees can't see at night, they hit the ground and skunks eat them. So the first step is bottom board. These are my preps in general. 18 inches. The next thing that I put on, how many of you have seen the slatted racks before? Okay. How many of you use slatted racks? Okay. So the slatted rack initially was put out as a spacer above your landing board between your brood box. A lot of the thinking was that this would help you deter bearding on the front of your hive. So during times when there's a lot of nectar and your hive is trying to dehydrate the nectar down to honey, then they of course beard on the front of the hive to get out of the way of the ventilator so that they can excel at dehydrating the honey. So they say by putting this on that will cause the bees to have an extra space underneath right near the entrance, and that will cut down on bearding. I've found that not to be the case. Hives with bees and without them seem to beard the same. But what this does do, because there's a solid board here at the entrance, and this is right side up, by the way. Somebody wrote me that they had it upside down by mistake. This is the way it goes. And the space is beneath, and your entrance is under here. The solid board here does a couple of things. One, it cuts down on the amount of air that's blowing in the wintertime through your entrance of the hive. Number two, it also shelters your entrance from bees that die from the mantle of the cluster during the wintertime. They fall onto this instead of completely over your entrance, so it helps you keep your entrances open in wintertime. So that's a double benefit there. The other thing is, if you're one of the people that does oxalic acid vaporization in your hives and you use the pan method to deliver that, when you run that through the entrance, it's created a space between your pan that's going to heat up and deliver the oxalic vapor, and of course the bottom of the frames, which could be coated with wax, which could start a fire. So it has a utility aspect. The other thing is, for oxalic acid vaporization delivery, this is where I drill my quarter 20 hole in the back because I use a ProVap 110 to deliver the oxalic from the back. So then I don't have to drill any holes into the hive itself. I'm also going to show a video at the end of today's presentation, and this is the back of this. You'll be able to see this from inside a hive while the hive's being attacked by yellow jackets. So that's my second box. My wintering setup is really basic. I'm following Dr. Thomas Seeley, his layout for natural adaptations for bees and beekeeping as much as possible. We know these are not trees, but we do our best to replicate that, and we keep our hives small. So that means for me, a single deep and then a medium, that is the entire hive for winter. The medium is chock-a-block with honey. That's about 40 pounds of stored honey, which in this area is what I found is what they need to get through our extended winters. So the next box, I know this is a medium, but imagine in your mind that that's your deep. So that's my setup, and then there would be a medium above that to go into winter. And then this gets us into what I'm supposed to talk about today, which is new equipment. So I don't know how many of you have seen the new insulated inner cover from Be Smart Designs. Raise your hand if you've heard of it. Oh good, it's new to about half of you. So this will be the first winter going into winter with an insulated inner cover. I've always used in the past a feeder shim that had an integrated bottom board with it. We put a wrapped around feeder in there, and then we put an insulated cover on top of that. But by dropping your insulation down to the inner cover itself, we put your winter cluster as they rise through the hive, and they end up right here in the top. They'll have a nice warm area that they control, and this is an R factor of 10. So some people like to have a vent on their upper entrance, and they have an upper inner cover that also might have a little groove in it. This has an option for both ways of thinking. And there's a little groove in the bottom of this. So if you don't want the upper vent, you simply reverse it so the entrance is over here and it's blocked. If you do want the upper vent and an upper access, it's here. And what's interesting about that is that this little opening in the front, this is not a wide open upper vent. Some people put an upper entrance, it's a 3/4 inch hole. Very difficult for the bees to defend sometimes, but this long channel at this entrance, if it were open, allows only 2 bees to pass, so it's bee space, which means that it's easily defended if something's trying to come in and rob them. They have to engage to the entire length of that channel. For me personally, what I'm doing is no upper venting, because that's what Thomas Seeley is putting out now. And based on what we've recently learned about the hive dynamics inside during wintertime, evaporating that moist, humid air to the top of your hive is more detrimental than beneficial to the bees. So we no longer do upper venting. So this is what goes on as the inner cover. Then we talk about winter feeding. You have the opportunity to close this up, so center hole here. My preferred feeding setup is just a simple plastic wrapped around feeder. These are good for year round, so only hives, of course, that need the help. Last winter, when a lot of people lost their colonies, my bees did not use up all their resources that were already in the hive in the form of stored honey in the frames. That's going to reduce their consumption of those resources even more this year because we're adding more insulation to the hive with the insulated inner cover, and on top of that is going to be the B-Max, which is the thickest polystyrene cover I could find, which goes right over the top of that. Now we have R20. So if you have a feeder shim around that, of course, that box has to be a 10 frame if you're on an 8 frame box. So this is a 10 frame design that sits on top of an 8 or 10 frame. It's sitting on an 8 right now. So you see we have these overhangs here on the sides. If you put a feeder shim around that to accommodate a tank feeder, inverted jars, whatever your feeding preference is, you're going to need a 10 frame box to house that. And then the insulated inner cover over the top of your box will sit like that. The advantage to that is once you put a wrapped round or something like this on your hive, that diameter of the wrapped round hole at the bottom matches perfectly with the Bee Smart hole that rises up through that gives your bees access to the feed. And you take off your clear inner cover because that's for syrup, because we want to limit the surface area of the syrup during the spring, for example, if you have a weak colony that you're trying to build. But in wintertime now, this comes off, and I personally, again, this is just what I do, I dump cane sugar in and fill this hole, put a 4-pound bag of sugar right in that, put this cover on which blocks airflow, and then some people are concerned that there will be some condensation on the interior surface of that cover for the wrapped round, and that's true. And I actually want the condensation up there because once again, we need the moisture that rises and condenses when it hits the dew point on top, because the bees are going to use that water to process the dry sugar that you have there, which ultimately will become a sugar block during winter. And it's easy because it's a translucent material. Again, even though we get maybe a 50 or 60 degree warm up one afternoon, you can pull the cover off and see right through the sides without opening it exactly how much sugar you have and whether or not your bees are even consuming it. So the new item for this is this insulated inner cover, and it's by Be Smart Designs. So that's what I'm testing out, so I haven't been through a winter with it. But I know already, based on theory alone, that going in the winter, these are going to improve my bees' wintering ability and their ability to control that warm climate, that pocket of heat in the top of the hive. So now, the guy that makes this stuff, the owner of Bee Smart Designs, has worked to deal with BetterBee.com, who sells a lot of bee equipment. If you buy their hive cover, it's called a duo system, the hive cover and this insulated inner cover. They said if you mention my name, they'll give you a present. I'm sure it's an extremely valuable present, worth easily more than $3. But that's my setup. That's the new piece of gear. The other new item, which is going to lead us into the next part of my discussion, which is about another new innovation that I'm testing this year. And the reason it refers to me as a citizen scientist is because these are practical tests that we do. This is a simple piece of plastic that's developed by an animal trainer, of all things, in New Zealand. And what happened was, in New Zealand, just like our northwestern United States, the bees get overwhelmed with yellow-jacket wasps, and they were losing as many as 50% of the honeybee colonies, even though they reduced their entrances, as we do here. The wasps were invading the colonies, overtaking the guard bees, and then exploiting all the resources, which of course makes it so your colonies cannot survive winter. So this is the most interesting little piece of plastic that we're evaluating this year going into the first winter. And the citizen science is that we have participants that have these all over the world right now, and they're reporting on how well your bees can defend it. Well, I'm originally from Missouri. That's the show me state. So we have to see things to believe it. And so what I've done is 2 days ago, I have a small colony of bees. It was one of those late season swarms, so it was in August. And it's one of those swarms that you find on the ground, about the diameter of a soccer ball. Pretty doomed. Who wants to put that in a hive and use your hive equipment to try to fortify a small colony like that and get them through winter? So what I thought, twofold. One, I was testing a new bee vacuum called the Colorado Bee Vac. Great opportunity to vacuum them off the ground. The other thing is we have these 5-gate units, and it would be a great way to see if a tiny colony like that, that's absolutely by every practical beekeeping observation you would think they would be doomed. So what happens is this little colony is actually holding its own. It reflected in August, so that's given them time to do some building up. They also have this insulated cover on, and they have these entrances and down to a single entrance. Larger colonies have 2 entrances side by side. And the way these work, the bees come through this entrance, but they come up inside the hive underneath the area where the bees cluster. So in wintertime, this is really important because they control their ventilation better. How do bees control ventilation? With the bodies of bees that occupy the space, they either reduce it or open it up, and they line up and fan across each other's backs the way they do in normal configuration. The difference is now the hive entrance is now 3/4 of an inch thick. With a 3/4 inch thick opening, whether it's a raiding honeybee that wants to rob them out this time of year from a strong colony, all they have to do is get through the 3/4 of an inch, they scoot to the sides, up the interior, and right into the honey stores. If they have to go through this channel, then their opportunity to engage a defense bee, a guard bee in the hive, and for that guard bee to release a threat pheromone, alarm pheromone, and get the rest of the bees to come down and help fight the wasps, that's enhanced by this. The other thing is they're built on a pivot. So in the wintertime, where my hives are, they focus their brood on the eastern to south side of the hive. So if they're building up fresh comb, for example, they always tend to start building towards that warmer wall in the morning. And then so the last part of the west sides of the hives. So we get a chance, once we know where the cluster is, you rotate this and move it so the entrance is underneath the cluster where the bees are. So that also improves efficiency of airflow where they have the brood. Questions about any of that?
It's a great mouse garden.
What?
It's a great mouse garden.
Well, yeah, mice can't get through it. European hornets can. Asian giant hornets cannot. So, which we don't have yet. But if you're in Washington, the tables there. So now, I'm going to show a video that shows that underdog colony that I described collected in August. And you're going to see inside the hive and outside the hive exactly what's going on and how we're turning a tiny colony of bees into wasp killers. And I'll be around afterwards if you want to talk to me about anything at all.
Over the 21st, yesterday I posted a video showing Hive 7, which is a late season swarm. They were being overwhelmed by yellow jacket wasps, and a lot of them were getting through their hive gate entrance, and that's what this is. Only today, the 21st of October, at this moment it's only 51 degrees outside, and the yellow jacket wasps, wouldn't you know it, are getting free rein through that entrance, with the odd worker bee running around, not able to engage them. And we're looking through a borescope camera. And we're looking at the solid bottom board from the inside, and we're looking at the interior edges of the frames. This is a single 10-frame deep. We're also looking through a slatted rack, which is 2 inches thick. That's what these slats immediately adjacent to the camera are, and then we see some dark comb up above, and I can't tell if they have any nectar in there or not, if they've already been rocked out. It would not be unusual for these lower cells on these deep frames not to be full of honey this time of year. There goes another yellow jacket wasp. And people were stressed and they had some questions. So in this video, we're going to answer some of those questions. And I'm also going to show you the interior and how the bees cope with yellow jacket wasps once they gain entry. Because remember, the hive gate system, although it's an entrance reducer of sorts, it is a long channel, it is not necessarily designed to stop robbing bees and yellow jacket wasps and others that would be predators to the hive at the entrance, but rather provide the bees with an opportunity to deal with those who do get in at the center of the hive, supposedly underneath the cluster where the bees would be warmer and able to defend themselves even on colder days. So here we are at 51 degrees Fahrenheit. The bees do cluster, and that's where I assume they are up above. And why these yellow jackets? Most of them queens, by the way, because in October that's what they're doing. They're coming in here unimpeded. And the bees up above are too cold to come down and engage them the way they otherwise would later in the day. So it is kind of astonishing to see how many of these wasps are cruising around all over this bottom board, and some of them are scooting up in between the slatted rack. And I can only assume, because I can't see it, that they are making their way up near the cluster, but probably not able to get through the cluster of honeybees up above. Now we see a yellow jacket directly in front of the camera here, not moving too good. Looks like it might have already interacted with some guard honeybees, and maybe it's not faring too well. But another thing that we get to do here with this scope is we can see what the interior looks like from the bee's point of view and from the wasp's point of view. And you can see that that metal plate all the way at the other end there has some light coming out underneath of it, and this is what draws robber bees that are non-residents to the front. And also invasive wasps here, sometimes they get disoriented and they follow the light to the front as well and just end up trapped up against that metal guard there, where they can actually starve out at night, or in some cases the bees even catch up with them there and they can sting them to death. And I know this doesn't look good. Look at this one, carrying a little protein pouch with it. So when you see a wasp carrying a chewed up pile of animal protein like that, we know that they're still rearing their own brood as well, because just as bees use pollen as a protein resource to raise their brood, wasps use animal protein to raise their brood. And I believe that's a queen right in front of us there, and I don't think she's going to make it. She seems to have a lot of difficulty clambering over the edge. So we're also going to answer some questions that others had about who stings who, what do the bees sting each other in a fight, for example, trying to defend their hive, and do they die from it? And can other bees die from bee venom? Well, we know that that is true, because when one honeybee stings another honeybee, they can kill each other with their own venom. This is how a queen honeybee kills off competing queens. What I'm doing is cycling through some of the illumination levels here on the camera. Also, some of the reactions of the wasps and bees inside here are probably due to the light that I've introduced through the back, which would normally be completely dark other than the light sources that we see. That's why this wasp is right up close to the lens. We can also see how much light is coming through the hive gate itself. So this is interesting. Don't be too frustrated because things are going to turn here. Once it gets into the 60s, which today it's promised to be, then you're going to see a change. When the honeybees start to break their cluster, more guards can come down, and then you're going to see the tables turn on these wasps a little bit. So all is not lost here. If this hive had actually been robbed out completely, we would not see this nice, clean landing board here. It's a solid landing board, so debris does not fall through any screens and things like that. Therefore, if they were robbed and defeated, we would see the bottom board strewn with bits and pieces of wax and propolis as their stored honey and nectar and everything was robbed out. Robbers make a huge mess, and this bottom board is pretty clean. The other thing you notice is there are not a lot of dead bees and wasps here on this bottom board at this point. That's going to change too. Now this honeybee does not have a good healthy posture. Her head is cocked to one side. She seems to be wiggling around in a strange way as if she's irritated, and she may have actually been stung by one of the wasps. Although most of the queens, most of the wasps that have come in here at this time, even though they have this cold weather advantage, they're after nectar. They're after high sucrose value, high carbohydrate value resources. And that's why they risk their lives to come in here and raid a beehive, which appears at this time of day to be undefended. So it's now 53 degrees, and we're going to go back out again when the temperatures rise, so we can see what the differences are. Now at 68 degrees Fahrenheit, I think we're going to see a little difference in the bees' ability to defend themselves. We do have storms coming in, rain is on the way, we have heavy overcast skies, which generally results in more defensive colonies. And this shows the backyard apiary here. By the way, this is the only one that is being pilfered by these yellow jackets right now. This is not the storm swarm. This is colony hive number 7. The storm swarm that a lot of people have asked about is to the left of this colony, and they are still holding their own. That was a well-populated hive. This is by far the smallest colony of bees in the apiary right now. So I'm also going to show you a view through the entrance. So let's travel in here, and there we have a yellow jacket wasp engaging with a guard bee. So notice now we have a lot more guard bees out. The temperatures have warmed up. We do have foragers heading out from this colony, and there are pollen resources being brought in as well, which indicates that there is some brood in here. Often when a colony loses a queen, for example, they also lose their desire to defend the colony, which is interesting. So these bees, although they're small in number, appear to be very capable, and they also seem to be queen right. So I think we're okay. Not too long ago we inspected the hive, and we found out that there is a queen. Of course, she's marked, and they had brood, but of course brood this time of year is tapering down. But this shows you what any insect going through the hive gate entrance would see. And you can also see that the surface is somewhat textured, so the bees can get their footing here. And this is the point where they would cross over and get into the hive. We also look for bits and pieces of remnants of cast-offs on the bottom. I don't see any dead varroa mites either, which is a good sign. So now that we've seen the entrance, we're also going to be able to take a look in through the back of the hive so we can see what's going on. But it seems like that yellow jacket just got in, gets over the lip, and she's home free, right? Well, not so fast. Let's get out of here and go through the back of the hive and see what's going on. So I have these 1/4-20 threaded screws. They're placeholders, so I can do oxalic acid vaporization if I need to, but they're just handy for putting in this oscope. So now things have changed. More bees on deck. We've got dead and dying bees as well. We've got dead and dying wasps. Now keep in mind that the yellow jacket wasps are not the only things that would like to rob out another hive this time of year. We have honeybees that would like to raid the hive. So another question that I received was, why are they attacking some of the other honeybees and not just the wasps? Is there any chance those are also robber bees? Well, that's exactly what they are. Because when those bees get in the hive too, they're unfamiliar, and sometimes they panic when they run into the guard bees here, and they rush towards the front, forget all about the hive gate, which is how they got in, and instead they head towards the light that you see farther away. So now we've got plenty of guard bees here with the will to fight. So someone else asked me, do they release some kind of pheromone that lets the other bees know that they're being attacked? Well, absolutely they do. So they release a pheromone, which is a threat pheromone, and this is what we hope to avoid, of course, when bees get upset with us. They release pheromones when they sting. They also have a mandibular pheromone that they can release. The guard bees do, and it does summon the other bees to help them, which is what's going on right here with that yellow jacket wasp. Several bees are working on her, so it's no longer a one-on-one situation for these guard bees. Because when the hive is threatened, just like if you were to open up a hive and treat it rough and start banging things around, you would get more than just the guard bees. You get every bee that's capable of flying and stinging. And here we see that as the yellow jackets come over this edge on the inside, they're being thoroughly attacked by the honeybees. Now I wasn't able to get the scope up in between the frames to see what's going on up above, but what's going on down here is pretty darn convincing. And this is what the hive gate is designed to do. Channel them in, and if they do decide to come all the way in and not just turn around and run right back out, they're going to stroke it a bit without having a scope like this to look at the interior. You want to get out there early in the morning, because at night skunks cruise around and clean up dead bees and wasps and things like that. So we want to see what the undertaker bees threw out. So near the end of this video, I'll show you in front of the landing board, and we'll look to see if there are dead wasps, honeybees. There's another yellow jacket being engaged there at the top left. We're going to see how many dead yellow jackets there are out front. The bees are able to drag out dead bees and detritus through these entrances. So the hive gates don't impede swarming, queen mating, cleaning up and hauling dead things out and debris and things like that. They do all of the same duties through it, so it's not a problem there. And as I mentioned, there are 21 colonies in this apiary, and this is the only one currently really being invaded by yellow jackets. We have hive gate units on half of those hives. So the next thing coming up, of course, will be how well they get through winter and what that's like. We're going to look at dead bees that might accumulate in the hive gates. We're going to show you during winter how to keep those cleaned out. Cleaning out dead bees from all of your hives is going to be very important in winter if you get heavy snow. And if you don't already know, this is the northeastern United States, the state of Pennsylvania, and we get heavy snows here. So it'll be a great opportunity to evaluate these entrances right through winter to see how the bees manage moisture and air circulation, and how they haul out, of course, dead bees. And I may stick this borescope in here and get looks at the interior even during winter. It's something I haven't done in the past. It's kind of an afterthought this morning. I thought, wow, I had that O-scope. Why don't I just go out and see what's going on inside and see what happens when these yellow jackets come through the hive gate. Well, now we know. And it isn't pretty. In a perfect world, those wasps would mind their own business, and all the bees would have to do is bring in resources. And right now we still have cosmos in bloom and some asters. So all the honey, nectar, pollen, everything they bring in now this time of year is just for the hives, but they're definitely impacted by raids like this. So now Now let's go outside and see what's going on, and this is right in front of hive 7. So this is the same hive that was being attacked yesterday. I did have to pull some of the grass out of the way to get a look at bees and the wasps that are dead in front of the colony. Some of these were probably here yesterday. I didn't really look for them. But some of these are fresh kills. How do I know that? Well, they're still twitching. They're still moving. So these were actually probably stung a lot by the bees inside the hive and flew out on their own or crawled out on their own and fell on the ground. We do see the bees trying to drag out wasps, kicking and squirming, and a lot of these have their stingers extended.
Let's help you out here. So when you buy this hive gate, does it come with this?
That's one package, yeah.
Okay.
You can buy hive gates independently by themselves, or you get the whole kit. There's also one for nucleus boxes that has a periscope face on it. So if it's a 3/4 inch hole, it also protects a beginning nucleus. I have not tested that. And the entrance guard here is either for the single hive gate, or you flip it over and you can have two, which we have on the largest colonies. Yeah. So we would have two side by side, and then the same thing, they pivot inside with the position of your cluster.
And this is like a little awning here?
No, that's just a finger grip, because your entrance is down below here, so then you just have screw holes here, so it's reversible, pull it up, pull it off, flip it, push it back on, push it down.
Great. Well, I want to turn this over to question and answer, so Fred, come up over here, get to the front. Who has a question here at all?
No question.
We got one.
Yes.
I hope this isn't a dumb question. How do you clean out dead bees in the middle of winter? With
this or in general?
In general.
In general, what I do is I go to the entrances, and I have, and here's what I forgot to bring, is a hive cleaning tool, which fits through the front. It's just a hooked piece of metal that I stick in. I also use kebab sticks, those bamboo kebab sticks. I just stick them in, put them together, and pull the bees out. I do that every morning after a snow. So the reason is because I've lost colonies of bees in the spring. When you look at it and you think that the bees, when they get a nice clear day, they can do their cleansing flights, that they'll be hauling out dead bees. Well, they do their cleansing first because they have to eliminate their honey gut, right? So the next thing that they do is move into housekeeping. So if the weather is staying warm enough for them to do that, they get that out. So we have to help them out by scooping out the dead bees on your bottom board. If you don't, it can block their point of egress. So, and that's where some people like to keep an upper entrance in winter. But if you cannot attend your hives and clean the dead bees out of that entrance, you do need to have an elevated entrance off the bottom. Some people use the entrance reducer and flip it upside down so that now the bees can get over the top of it. But I highly recommend if you have access to your apiary in the wintertime, always go out and do a visual observation to see if there's venting going on, because you'll see the snow's melted away from that entrance. There'll be a little channel. If that's the case, I leave that alone. If I don't see evidence of venting, then I pull all the bees out. And getting the dead bees out, it's also eliminating moisture on your bottom board, because as we know, they take on moisture, they decompose, and they smell like a dead animal.
So if you have mouth guards on, you would go out and remove that. I just use my hive tool with this, with the hook. Put it on in there, and it gets a lot of them out.
Yeah.
Yours is longer though, right?
Well, and a spoiler alert on that is that gift that they're giving you at Better Bee is a hive clean out tool that goes back 18 inches.
18, so you're getting that deeper.
Usually worth over $3.50.
Okay, can I get a pause for this young man here?